Hey there, I'm Grace.
And I'm Amelia.
And welcome to the Women Invest in Real Estate podcast, where we talk about getting started in real estate, scaling, and we give you the inside scoop about our day-to-days as full-time investors.
Interested in learning how to double your cash flow without the headache of turning your property into a hospitality-based short-term rental? Introducing Midterm Rentals. Register for our self-guided Midterm Rental Profit Academy course, where we walk you through step-by-step how to identify, analyze, furnish, market, and self-manage a midterm rental. Sign up at womeninvestinrealestate.com/MTR Profit Academy and use code PODCAST for $50 off today.
Welcome back to episode 7, where we're going to talk about, is the midterm rental market changing? Amelia, what's your answer?
Episode 7. I had to get that in there. Is the market changing? Okay, so obviously we know that the COVID pandemic is subsiding. Fingers crossed, at least we hope that it is. So I get this question all the time. Are we seeing a reduction in requests from traveling nurses because of this? Do we think that the market is slowing down? Do we think it's changing? And personally, my answer is yes, I think it's changing. Is that going to stop me from continuing the midterm rental strategy? No. There's certain steps that I'm taking to mitigate some of this risk, but I don't plan on converting any of my units or stopping the midterm rental units anytime soon. What about you, Grace?
My short answer would actually be no. I have not seen a change in requests. I still get bombarded, especially my one bedrooms, because a lot of people are traveling single. Oh my God. Solo travelers. Why was that so hard? A lot of people are solo travelers more than anything else. However, like you said, am I going to go buy another 10 midterm rentals to turn over right now? Probably not. If it was the right deal, I would, especially if it was one beds. But I still see a huge demand, and it might just be because I'm in a market where there really isn't a ton of midterm rental options, but there are a few big hospitals. Like I said in previous episodes, I get tenants who drive 20, 30 minutes to their hospital because there isn't anything. I am in a smaller area, more rural area, but I don't think it's probably ramping up.
So I think that the short answer here is that neither one of us have any idea.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, that is true though, because if we did know, if somebody knew exactly what was going to happen, same with the economy, they would be a bajillionaire, but nobody knows.
Right. So in Des Moines, biggest city in Iowa, I've seen a little bit of a slowdown in requests, but I still have plenty of people to choose from tenant wise. So I'm not having like large vacancies or anything like that. I have had one or two nurses recently who have had their contracts canceled, but then they've moved to another city and continued doing traveling nursing there. So one way that I think that both of us are mitigating some of this risk, and I think this will be helpful, is the way that we're structuring our lease and the specific terms that we're putting in there. One, to protect us as landlords, and two, to also help those travelers out if their contracts do get canceled. So Grace, like what specifically are you putting in your lease to help combat this?
Yeah, in my lease, it says you're on the hook for your rent if you cancel until I find a new tenant. And I think that is very fair for both parties.
And that's verbatim. In the lease, it says you're on the hook. Those are legal terms.
Those are absolute legal terms. And then in the fine print, it says, but I will work really quick to try to find another tenant. However, I think that's super fair because I'm already, I guess, going riskier by giving them a 3-month lease, whereas a lot of people will only give 6 or a year month lease, or you have to go find a hotel. And I'm also making sure I protect myself because I make sure there's no vacancy. So like you're still on the lease until I find someone. And that has happened to me twice, I believe. And I found a tenant both times under 2 weeks.
I had one nurse who had their contract canceled before they even started. They'd already paid the $500 deposit. I charged $1,200 for my monthly rent. So it's not even 1 month rent.
Right.
So they'd already paid $500. They sent me an email. So they said, my contract's been canceled. I assume you're going to keep the deposit. Quite frankly, I probably would have given it back to them. But the fact
when
that
someone says, I assume you're keeping it, I keep it.
Yeah, me too. And it's like, because I had held the unit for her. She did put a deposit
Right.
down to hold the unit. So I had held, I didn't have any trouble finding somebody else. But yeah, I kept her deposit there. So that's
And
why
I
you get deposits from these people to hold
Exactly.
these
That's
units.
the exact point of a deposit because you
Right.
can't hold something empty for them to never show up. And I think that's very fair. She was only out 500. She didn't have to pay the whole lease.
Yep.
And you got a little bit of your money back for the vacancy that you had to experience because of the contract cancellation, which wasn't either of your fault.
Yep.
But, you still have to make sure that you have something in your lease. When I first started, I didn't have anything in my lease. And I don't think I had any cancellations, but people would always ask me. So I pretty quickly put something together and got it in my lease just to make sure that if anything happened, I would be good. I think both of my contract cancellations were pretty close to each other. And maybe that was like 3 or 4 months ago. And it did freak me out. I was like, oh my God, is everything getting canceled? And then since then, I haven't had anything. I've had lease extensions. I've had great luck with tenants. So I feel very good about where we're at right now. But yeah, that's how I feel at the moment.
And I think another thing that we both use to protect ourselves is we are investing in multifamilies. So we have some sense of diversification in our units so that if for some reason the midterm rental market tanks or really, really slows down, we can convert a few of the units back to
Mhm.
long term. We have that cushion and that safety net of having multiple units in the same building.
What I always go back to is at the worst, I go back to a long term rental that just happens to have furniture. And maybe I can't charge the premium for the furniture, but at least I don't have to get rid of it or I don't have to do something with it. And I'm only spending two, three, maybe 4 grand per unit on furniture, anyways, which I should get back
Yeah.
within 6 months of having my midterm rentals. So there really isn't an investment after those first few months. I've already made that furniture money back. So I don't see it as a huge risk. For me, if all I have to do is pay 2, 3, 4 grand for furniture to get triple the cash flow and I make that money back within a few months, I might as well get every month of that type of cash flow out of it as I can. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to back down out of it until I absolutely have to.
Right. And like for me, I think that like my strategy would be like midterm rentals. If I can't find anyone, it's Airbnb or short term rental.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work either, it's sell the furniture and turn it into a long term. Lots of options. I think the other big thing for me with the multifamily diversification is that I can charge less for my midterm units because I'm not strapped like I would be if I only had a single family home that I had
Mm-hmm.
run my numbers only using a midterm rental
Mm-hmm.
strategy. So, like long term, it doesn't work out, which I think is a really big competitive advantage because if there's other midterm rental owners in the Des Moines area that can't lower their prices, that puts
Mm-hmm.
me at a really competitive advantage.
Yeah, I'm not buying anything that doesn't work long term. It might be that it's not a home run long term and it is a home run on midterm rental. I'll buy that. But if it does not work as a regular long term rental, I'm not buying it because you can't count on that. And that's what I love so many things about midterm rental, but the coolest thing is I've said this 3 times now, but for a few grand of furniture, you can get triple the rent when usually in real estate, you have to triple the purchase price to get triple the rent or put a
Absolutely.
crap ton of rehab into your real estate. So to be able to spend a very little amount of money to triple your top line is insane.
That's why we both are like obsessed with the midterm rental strategy. How many times can we say midterm rental in this show?
I know.
It's yet
Drink
to be
every time
determined.
we say
Yeah.
midterm rental. Another great idea that I'm exploring right now is there's a lot of insurance agencies out there who are looking to house people for a medium term, maybe a few months, a month to 6 months to a year, who might need furnished housing because they've got a client whose house burnt down, whose basement flooded, whose whatever. And the insurance agency is the one who pays you because they're insuring these people. And so what I've done is I reached out to my insurance broker and I said, "Hey, who does that? get me in contact with them. And he said, we actually hire a third party. This is the business. So I got in contact with somebody. I can't even remember the name, but basically they're in charge of all those claims of housing people who have home emergencies and need other housing. And I am buying a house right now that I don't really want to put a long-term tenant in just because I know I can get a little bit more if I do midterm rental, but it's a 3-bed, so I don't want to furnish it. So I reached out to her and said, hey, here's my price. Do you have anybody that you need? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. Let me talk to my team. And now I can get a little bit more for my monthly income. I don't have to furnish it because what they'll do is they'll hire people to furnish it. The insurance company will.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's a little bit less risky because the insurance company is the one on the line for security deposit, for the rent, and for basically the livelihood of the property. And also, I get to help out a family who right now probably has no options and is living in a hotel because people don't know that you can rent your house like this.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've had people reach out and ask because we mentioned in our course that some of the people that you can rent to are insurance claims. And they say, well, how do I get
Just
residence
ask.
of it? You think about it logically here. If I
I
want to
know.
get an insurance claim person in my unit, who should I go to? Well, probably an insurance agent. They're probably going to have a contact. It's like real estate, in my opinion, is not rocket science.
No,
Like we just have to think logically. We got to be problem solvers and
think
just like
outside the
work
box
through.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't read that anywhere. I didn't hear a podcast about that. I literally was like, oh my God, these people have to have a home. Let me just ask. And then did I know that there was this nationwide company that literally that's their job to house people? Heck no. But I found them just by asking. And now that I think about it, one of my initial I think my very first tenant, my very first purchase was 2 duplexes. So I inherited 4 units of tenants. I'm pretty sure one of those units, well, I know for a fact their house burnt down, and I'm pretty sure their property or their insurance paid us. So they were doing that, but I didn't really understand it at the time
Mm-hmm.
because I think they did like a deposit into my bank account. So I never really saw who paid the rent or whatever. But now that I'm looking back on it, I literally had a tenant like that. I just inherited them. So I never worked with the insurance company.
It's just common sense. Yes, while there may be a little bit of slowdown in certain markets with traveling nurses. Well, first of all, traveling nurses that's been a thing for a long time. I remember I had a cousin like 20 years ago who was like a traveling nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really talked about it then, but it's been around forever. So it's going to continue to be a thing. But the second thing I think that's really shifted with the COVID pandemic is remote workers. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot more people are working remotely and therefore aren't tied to a physical location. And so they're looking for 3-month accommodations where they can experience different cities for a
Mm-hmm.
short period of time and work in those furnished units.
Yep. I did exactly that in the fall of 2020. I had a remote job. So my boyfriend and I went to Missoula, Montana for 3 months. Had I known Furnish Finder existed, I would have saved a ton of money by going through that platform. I booked through Airbnb for 3 months. And yeah, I just worked there. I also used to work in the summers in college in California, and I would pay an insane amount of money for an Airbnb for 3 months. Had I known Furnish Finders existed then, I would have saved so much money. And I probably would have had a perfect place, just like a little 1 bed, 1 bath apartment for me. I just worked and, hung out on the weekends. So I didn't need anything fancy. But had I known that existed, and a lot of people don't, but I think they are realizing now that those options do exist. Like you said, the remote worker type person is gaining a lot of traction. And I think we'll see a lot more people who do that.
Yeah. And that also brings me to another point here is yes, you very well could have found an awesome place on Furnish Finder, but landlords should be cross-listing their midterm
Mm-hmm.
rentals on Airbnb. So that's another way that Grace and I are
Mm-hmm.
both diversifying our risk is we have our properties listed on multiple platforms because we're trying to reach the biggest audience that we can. So again, another way to kind of mitigate risk, list on Airbnb, list on VRBO, list
Mm-hmm.
on Furnish Finder, list on Facebook, word of mouth, anything and everything.
All in all, that is where we think the market is going. Of course, we don't know for sure, but if you're nervous about midterm rentals, just know that there are many ways to protect yourself and diversify. If there's any shift in the market, you will still feel good and be safe.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to check us out and join our community at womeninvestinrealestate.com and follow us on Instagram at WIIRE with 2 eyes.community.